This may be a crazy thing to say, but after 15 years of being a software engineer, I finally understand how to never have a bad job, never have a bad project, never have a bad ticket, never have a bad client. I'm now able to avoid all of it. What am I talking about? I'm talking about that project that implodes, that you never got to finish because 12 things went wrong. Talking about that ticket that you got that you spend 3 hours coding on, and all of a sudden your lead engineer tells you it's not what they want. This ticket isn't done. You did the wrong thing. Or you have a business partner or a client that reaches out on Friday afternoon and says, hey, what about that project that you said you would do this week and you haven't even started? Those are all stories that I've personally been through, and now I know exactly how to avoid all of them. So in this video, I'm going to talk about like 3 big things. First thing is the biggest thing that I learned while being a freelancer. The second thing is how to incorporate this lesson into my everyday life and in my career. And then the third section is the most important one, where I'm going to list all the questions you need to ask yourself and your coworkers to make sure that you can always have a good job and not have something implode on you in the future. So when getting into freelancing of any sort, it doesn't have to be software, but when getting into freelancing, when it comes to a project, you're going to have to learn about something called the scope of work. Now, this idea is the cornerstone of how to have successful engagements with clients, with business partners, but also like in your everyday work. So the SOW, or the scope of work, essentially just defines that. It defines like what is going to happen on both sides for the worker and the employer for this project in order to make sure that this project is successful. The idea is if everyone involved hits every single marker on the SOW, then you can call that project a success. You can legitimately call it a success. So what are the things you need to cover in an SOW? One of the most important things is like timelines or deadlines. I know a lot of people chafe at the idea of a deadline. It makes you think of waterfall and everyone wants to be agile, but real businesses and real companies, they need deadlines and timelines to work around, and it's completely okay to talk about timelines and deadlines. You also want like detailed requirements. Detailed requirements explain like every single thing that is in the project that you need to get done in the certain way. And detailed requirements also include what's not involved. So like things that you are not supposed to do for this project that is outside the scope of this project. Also in a scope of work, you want to like outline what revisions look like, because when you actually submit something, whether that's code or a design, and the client or the business user asks for like just little tweaks and little changes, like how many times can they do that? And how many times do you want to like allow that to happen without really threatening any timeline or deadline that you have already? Now, how can you like incorporate the idea of an SOW in your life and in your career? And I'm here to say, first off, like you don't have to be a weirdo and make a giant like binding document for everything that you do in work and in life. The idea is to talk about these topics so that everyone gets over the problem of miscommunication. At the root of every bad project usually boils down to miscommunication or just not knowing certain things when you first started the project. An SOW should alleviate both those things so everyone's on the same page, and they also know how to act when things do change, because they do. Things always change. You can take this mindset to pretty much anything. You can do it for promotions, for the tickets you're working on at work, a project that you're leading, basically anything that is like a project based. You can have the idea of a scope of work, or at least think of it in the terms of a scope of work, so that you know at the very beginning to get all the miscommunication out of the way, and you can hit the road running and do the right thing the first time. Now, again, like this does not have to be like a legal document that you like send to your like coworkers and your friends. What it can be is just simply an email, so that you have it in like writing that like, oh, this is what I'm expecting to do. Like that can be considered a scope of work. So this brings me to my final section, and it's like questions that you can use to actually like treat your projects like their scopes of work, and how to ask the right questions. The first question you should always ask, no matter what task you're doing, is like, how urgent is this? Because more often than not, you may not know exactly, when or how this needs to be done, like if it's super important. And that prevents you from spending hours and hours and hours on a task that like is a nice to have. It's not a necessary thing, but it's like a nice to have. And then you're committing all this energy to the wrong space. The second question would be to ask like, when does this need to be done? Like actually done. So that way you can actually understand the timeline that they're expecting, and the timeline that you can have some sort of idea that you need to build into. Maybe that causes you to shift some work, or maybe it causes you to have the conversation of being like, that's not enough time, I need more. maybe we can change some of the requirements and actually find a better fit and a better timeline. The next question is asking like, who is in charge? Essentially, you want to ask like, who is the person that's going to say, thumbs up, this looks good? Because you want to make sure that when you submit something, when you finish your work, that you're presenting it to the right person to make sure that you have checked all the boxes, that the person that needs to know knows that this is done, that you've done the right thing for the right person. So if you have that contact at the beginning, you know who to contact through when you know things are changing. The next question is more of like a practice, a conversation you need to have with the person asking for it and looking at all the requirements for a project and asking what is a need and what is a want, because you want to make sure that you know, first off, what is like kind of a nice to have, and you want to fully understand that so that you can always focus on the needs. So if there's ever a chance where you have to rush or you have to meet a deadline, and let's be real, deadlines are very serious and very real, you can cut out scope that is part of the nice to have and maybe like put it onto a project later on. But as long as you're making sure that you cover all the needs first. And this next question isn't a question that's asked at the beginning, but it's asked like throughout the entire journey. When you're on a project and you're trying to talk to the product manager, the owner, the business partner, and things start changing, they start asking for some extra things, or maybe they pivot the requirements a little bit, you have to ask yourself, is this going to increase the scope of my work, or is this out of scope? So if it's out of scope, then you have to have the conversation of like what work needs to be punted, if this is something that we need to do and we need to readjust. You don't want to just blindly say yes to everything, because then you're going to set yourself up for the final chapter of this project being complete mayhem of trying to satisfy all the needs and all the asks from the project owner. Now, this question that you have to ask yourself is to battle something that's called scope creep. Now, scope creep is completely normal. Some people get really angry about it and they have to adjust and they're like, oh, you're asking too much of me. People aren't usually trying to exploit you. They're just trying to make sure that they get the project done the way they want to, and maybe it's like, oh, sweet, this is looking so great, and they get excited and they want more. That's completely normal, and it's just always worth the conversation of like, this seems out of scope. It seems like scope creep. Let's talk about how we can like either wedge it in or add it on to a project later on. The key here is to actually just talk to people. We're all just trying to discuss and find a way to find a solution together. And if you just talk to people and treat them like people, you're going to have a better time and you're going to have a good project that way. This may be cheesy, but through freelancing, I have learned so much about life and work that if you ever think about like getting into freelancing, please check out this video where I talk about getting into freelancing this year. Also, if you've made it this far in the video, just put a little bumblebee in the comments, because that warms my heart whenever I see people that actually make it to the end and they can comment. So let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.